Good morning and welcome to our lump sum webinar on lump sum funding in Horizon Europe. My name is Ulrich GENSCHEL. I'm a head of sector in the European Commission working on the simplification of our processes. And together with my colleague Andreia CHICOS, I have the pleasure to guide you through this webinar today. Some of you might have been with us last week. My apologies again for the technical problems we had. We had to cancel the webinar. This is the replacement date. Please stay with us if you were trying to watch the webinar last week. This is the replacement event. Before we start in earnest, I'm going to go through the agenda with you. First, I'm going to give an overview of how lump sum funding is working in Horizon Europe. That's a presentation of about 30-40 minutes, pointing at the differences in particular, where lump sum is different from traditional Horizon Europe funding. And then we are going to welcome a few guests who already have significant experience with lump sum funding and who are going to share this experience with us. And then maybe for up to an hour, we are going to have a question session with you, a Q&A session where you are supposed to be asking your questions through Slido, and we will answer those questions by order of popularity. So please, if you have a question that is already available by another user in Slido, please do not ask the same question as much as possible, but just upvote the existing question such that this question has a higher chance of being answered. We will normally not be able to answer every last question that comes in through Slido in this session. So without any further ado, let me start with my presentation. How is lump sum funding working in Horizon Europe? I already hinted, I'm pointing at the differences, and that is because lump sum funding works to the largest extent possible like any other grant in Horizon Europe. That is, we've reused the processes as much as possible, and only on a few specific points do we deviate. This is where the financial management is concerned, which is now replaced by lump sum funding, and we're going to see what this means. Why do we use lump sum funding in the first place? Very briefly, we need a system that reduces the financial error rate. Everybody agreed that in research spending, the error rate of the EU budget is too high. We want to simplify our funding. There is no doubt that the actual cost system is very complicated. You can see that, for example, in the very many pages with a lot of rules on which costs are eligible and how they must be calculated and reported in our model grant agreement and in the annotated model grant agreement. And the possibility to simplify that systems have been largely exhausted. So we are not going to make too much more progress that way, which is why we are looking for alternatives. And then, last but not least, we also want to focus more on content. The focus on financial management has taken away some of the focus on the content of what's actually going on in these grants, and this is, after all, what matters. What these grants are really, what the projects are really doing, and what comes out. This graph here illustrates a little bit another, situation in the framework program, which is serving both very large organizations and very small organizations, namely small and medium enterprises and newcomers. And you see that the vast majority of our beneficiaries, of the grantees, have only one grant in a 7-year period. On this, the graph that you see here shows the situation for Horizon 2020, the previous framework program. We saw the same situation in FP7, the program before that, and we have no doubt we're going to see the same in Horizon Europe. So what you see is that a very small number of big organizations have more than 100 grants, or had more than 100 grants, and that more than 26,000 had only one grant. In other words, the vast majority of our beneficiaries have very, very few grants. And because they have so few grants, they are not going to build up the administration or the experience that it takes to really comfortably deal with actual costs. This is different in the big organizations, which have many years of experience with this system. And we see that these big organizations make relatively few mistakes, while the small organizations make many mistakes. And of course, those mistakes also have consequences, which can be quite negative. Therefore, lump sum funding is a system that where these errors are removed because there's no financial reporting anymore, and a system that can work for all, both the small and the big participants. Since we've introduced this system in 2018, we've heard about concerns and also misunderstandings. And we are fully aware of them, but we see no blocking issues with them. In fact, our recent study of how lump sum funding has been doing so far until 2024 showed that these concerns have really not materialized, even though they have been repeated since we started planning for this quite a few years ago. In particular, there's the concern that there's a lot more work to set up a proposal, that there is less flexibility, and that there is more financial risk. Now, we found that while there is, of course, one extra step in the proposal, and we are going to see what it is, there is a misunderstanding that these details would not be needed in actual cost proposals. Of course they are. The only difference is that in actual cost proposals, these additional details are not submitted, but applicants by all means have to have them. There's also no reason to think of lower degree of flexibility. In fact, the degree of flexibility is the same or higher because there is no financial reporting, and the lump sum can be used as you see fit as long as you implement the project. And the project needs to be implemented in all our grants, obviously. So there is no difference there. And then finally, a higher financial risk. We are going to see data later in this presentation, and we've also published this recently in our analysis. There is really no evidence that lump sums come with a higher financial risk. If anything, they generate very much the same financial situation as is the case in our actual cost projects. So with that, I start with the more technical part. Lump sum funding in Horizon Europe comes in two flavors. The type 1 lump sum is where we decide the lump sum up front, and the applicants can only get this lump sum or nothing. So there is no choice of the amount of funding, but this is a type that we've designed really for high volume calls with relatively uniform grants coming out, and the only call that is using it in Horizon Europe is the ERC proof of concept. They are very happy with this system and have been using it since 2018. But the bulk of lump sum funding, and this is what I'm going to concentrate on in Horizon Europe, is the type 2, where the applicants define the lump sum in the proposal. Very much like in an actual cost proposal, the applicant, the consortium, makes up their mind what is the appropriate budget for the project they are going to apply for. They justify this budget, and after the evaluation, there is an agreement on what the final budget, what the final lump sum is going to be. And once this is signed in the grant agreement, we are not questioning it anymore. So this is this type 2, where you, the applicant, define the budget, is what I'm going to focus on in my presentation now. When you write a lump sum proposal, I already mentioned most of the time all the processes and principles are the same as in actual cost grants. So when you write a lump sum proposal, you use exactly the same application form as for all Horizon Europe proposals, namely the standard application form. And you present your methodology, your objectives, the whole project, technically, scientifically speaking, in exactly the same way as usual. We've recently provided a little bit more guidance on what it means to describe the activities, how much detail we want to see, and this is exactly the same for all proposals. Unit costs, actual costs, lump sums, any Horizon Europe proposal has now the same guidance in the standard template. So what we want you to do is describe the activities per work package, such that they can be evaluated and they can be monitored. What is on top, what is different from actual cost proposals is that you add a detailed budget table with the cost estimations that make up your lump sum. For that purpose, we provide you with an Excel table that you need to fill in for each partner, one section where each partner provides the costs and a breakdown of their costs using the best possible estimates. Make sure that you use the Excel template we provide in the submission system, not a copy that might be circulating otherwise. There can be adaptations to your particular topics in that Excel file, so make sure you use the version that is provided for your topic. So this Excel table, as I said, it is a means to collect and build your budget through entering cost estimations, and we fully understand that these cost estimations up front cannot be exact costs in the same way as costs can be when you report them after you've had them, after the activities. So now up front, what we want you to do is provide the best possible estimate, and these must be following your usual practices of building budgets for research projects. They must follow the same eligibility rules, and what that means essentially is any cost that is possible that can be reimbursed in an actual cost grant is equally possible in the budget of a lump sum proposal. No more and no less. Everything is exactly the same costs reimbursed in an actual cost grant and the same costs that are possible to build a lump sum budget and to justify the final lump sum. The measuring stick that we are going to apply, and you can think of that already when you build the budget, is that these lump sum cost estimations must be reasonable and non-excessive. That is what I mean when I say we don't necessarily need planning down to the euro. What is needed is that your estimations make sense and that they are not excessive, that they fit the activities that you are proposing and enable you to carry out the project as you propose it. Right, and finally, once you have provided these cost estimations, the budget table will automatically generate a breakdown of lump sums, of lump sum shares, one share for each work package and one share for each partner. We are going to see what this looks like. Don't forget to read the instructions in the Excel table on the first tab when you are preparing this budget. One other lump sum specificity is the design of work packages. Now, generally speaking, there is no difference. A work package should always be a major subdivision of the project, not really tiny packages of tasks. It should be a substantial part of the project. But in lump sum grants, you have the possibility, not the obligation, but the possibility to split work packages along the reporting periods. And that is in order to allow you to generate the same cash flow as in an actual cost grant. I show you an example what this can mean in practice. So on the top, you see the work package for project management that is running from the first month to the last month in a 4-year project. This is a project of 4 years. It has 3 reporting periods, and the management work package is lasting from start to finish, in the situation on the top. So in an actual cost grant, you can still be paid for the management activities at the end of each reporting period. In a lump sum grant, you could only be paid for this at the very end when this management work package is actually complete. Now, in case you need to be paid in terms of optimizing your cash flow, in case you need to be paid for this management work package, for this management work, already at the end of reporting period 1 and at the end of reporting period 2, and not only at the end of reporting period 3, then you have the possibility of splitting, as indicated. In the middle, you see a situation where this management work package has been split in 3 equal work packages, management 1, 2, 3, 1 for each reporting period. And in this situation, you can now, of course, be paid for work package 1, management 1, at the end of reporting period 1, and you can be paid for the second one at the end of the second reporting period, and so on. In other words, you do not have to wait until the end of the project to be paid. You are going to be paid in this situation, as in the case of an actual cost project, for the work at the end of each reporting period. I'd like to highlight that many of our grants have very high levels of pre-financing. 50% is quite typical, or 80% is also very often the case. So you have a substantial amount of pre-financing, and especially for projects that can expect to get 80% pre-financing, there's probably not much reason to do a lot of splitting, because, I repeat again, the splitting is there to optimize cash flow. It has no other technical or meaning in terms of lump sum funding. It is really a possibility for you to optimize cash flow if needed, and if you don't need it, then you should think whether you really want and need to split your work packages in this way. When it comes to the evaluation of a lump sum proposal, again, general principles are exactly the same. We use the three main criteria, the standard evaluation criteria of Horizon Europe, that is excellence, impact, and implementation. What's on top is that now we will evaluate the cost estimations that you provided in this Excel table, and this is done under the implementation criterion. First and foremost, our experts will check that your cost estimations are reasonable and non-excessive, and that this is an amount neither far too much nor far below what's needed, far too little, that allows you reasonably to complete the project that you proposed. Now, the experts may come to the conclusion that some of your cost estimations are not convincing. Either they are, or they could also be ineligible, because not all costs in Horizon Europe are allowed. I mentioned the same rules apply as for actual cost grants. So either we could find ineligible costs, or we could find costs that are overestimated, in which case the experts make recommendations to change or remove cost items. And we are going to then adapt the lump sum budget according to those recommendations. I can already say that this happens, but it doesn't happen at all to a large majority of projects. In fact, around about 90% of the selected lump sum grants have no changes to the budget that they proposed. And in 10% of the cases, we do make changes, but most of the time these changes are also not very, very big. So the projects by all means still have enough funding to go through. Another important pointer is that when we make changes, we are not penalizing the project with a lower score for implementation. This is sort of part of the lump sum process, that we evaluate your proposal for lump sum. We may make changes, but this does not mean that we lower the chances of your proposal to be funded. In other words, we are not decreasing the score. Decreasing the score for the budget would only happen if the budget is fundamentally flawed. It is not fit for purpose. Significant amounts of information are just missing, so it is not possible to properly evaluate it. But these are extreme cases, extremely rare. So normally, if you provide a complete budget for your lump sum, and that is a reasonable proxy of your actual cost for the project, there is no reason to expect any problems in terms of a lower score, even in case we need to make some corrections. One element that the experts are using, and that is a resource that is available to you as well, of course, is the dashboard for lump sum evaluations, where we use historical data since 2022, so we're not going back very long, historical data of personnel costs as they have been agreed in Horizon Europe actual cost grants. So we basically want to generate a situation in lump sums that is very similar, financially speaking, to that in actual cost grants. And therefore, we provide experts with the information how many person months have been funded at which cost in given countries and in given organization types in Horizon Europe actual cost grants. So the example that you see here is on the top, research organizations in Romania, and at the bottom, research organizations in Germany. This already illustrates that personnel costs in Europe and beyond Europe vary quite a lot. We could find examples where this divergence is even bigger. So personnel costs can easily be different by a factor of 10 across Europe. So we need to provide experts with some information of what are reasonable, normal personnel costs. And the key information you need to bear in mind is, in case that you have personnel costs per month that are higher than what is indicated on the dashboard, we expect you to justify that. Because then effectively you are in a situation where your costs are among the most expensive compared with your peers. In other words, with the other organizations in the same organization type in the same country. So that could be research organizations in Romania, it could be universities in Denmark, or it could be small and medium enterprises in France. All this is resolved, and you should compare your proposal with the costs that we have seen for this country and for this organization type. And when, in case you are really above the costs indicated here, that is a situation where you should, in your Excel budget table, in the comments tab, make sure that you explain why that is so. We've also provided some guidance on what we would normally expect in terms of justification. Now, we've done evaluation, we've selected the grant. What comes next? Grant preparation, same as in any other Horizon Europe grant, and we follow the standard process for the grant preparation. You will then use the model grant agreement for lump sum grants. This is a different type of model grant agreement, even though most articles in this model grant agreement are exactly the same as in other grant agreements. For research grants, what's different in this model grant agreement is that there is no obligation for financial reporting, and therefore also no obligation to keep financial records. What applies in the grant preparation in the same way as to all other grants is the no negotiation principle. So we will sign a grant that corresponds to the proposal. We may have some changes if needed, and that means, of course, if in the grant preparation process we still discover costs that are not eligible, for example, or other changes that are needed to comply with applicable rules. Sometimes there can still be changes in the consortium during grant preparation. Of course, all those are necessary changes, and these need to be taken into account and will be implemented during grant preparation. It is also possible that some of the costs there where no final decision could be taken during the evaluation may still be looked at during grant preparation. For the lump sum itself, the principle is that basically up to the point in time that we sign the grant agreement, we could change the lump sum. We could, if you like, negotiate the lump sum, and we can agree on a final lump sum. And once that's agreed, and once the lump sum has been signed in the grant agreement, we forget about the budget details, and we will only then have the lump sum in the grant agreement, and this lump sum is what's going to be paid if the project is delivered. That's what I say here at the bottom of the slide. Once in the grant agreement, once the grant agreement is signed, the lump sum will not be questioned, even if the prices for some goods or services or other parts of the project would change later on. In which direction doesn't matter. And maybe just to be clear, the detailed budget table that you submitted as part of your proposal will also not become part of the grant agreement. This was only a vehicle for you to justify and for us to evaluate the lump sum cost estimations, to agree a lump sum. Once we've agreed the lump sum and signed in the grant agreement, we forget these details. They are not a part of the contract, and we are going to pay the lump sum if the activities are completed. We are going to see more what this means. Now, here you see what you will find back in the grant agreement, the Annex 2, the financial annex. This is basically the breakdown of lump sum shares I mentioned before. You see you have the resolution of lump sums per work package and per beneficiary. So the last column of this table shows the lump sum shares for each beneficiary. So beneficiary A has a lump sum share of 1,150,000 and beneficiary D has a lump sum share of 420,000. The total lump sum is 3 million. And in the bottom row, you see the lump sum shares for each work package. So work package 1 has a lump sum share of 350,000, work package 8 has a lump sum share of 600,000. And you see that in some of the work packages, all the beneficiaries are going to participate, here in work package 4. And in many other work packages, there's only 2 or 3, or in work package 3, there's only one single beneficiary active. So the principle now is that the work packages are completed one by one, and you report to us that they are completed. And if we agree, we are going to pay automatically the price, the lump sum share agreed for that work package. You have entire full flexibility to use this budget as you want. As I mentioned before, that's the full flexibility you have financially speaking, as long as you carry out these activities that are described in the grant agreement. And another reason for you, the only reason really for you to change this payment schedule or lump sum breakdown is if you want for your purposes in the consortium, for being certain that the breakdown of lump sum shares in your grant agreement corresponds to the real situation in your project and reflects the relationship of all the partners in that consortium. But as far as we are concerned, there is no need to amend it as long as you are in a position and able to deliver the activities and carry out the activities as described, because in that situation, we are going to pay the full lump sum. Payments are happening in the same way and following the same schedule as usually. There is a pre-financing payment, and the rules for deciding the pre-financing are exactly the same as for other projects. So there is really no change whatsoever. It is paid at the beginning of the project. The interim payments work slightly differently. I mentioned already, there is one or more interim payment depending on how many reporting periods you have. And at this point in time, we will pay the share of the completed work packages. So this works in a very simple way. You declare which work package has been completed. This gets evaluated by the project officer, maybe with the help of external experts. And if we agree, this is the share that is going to be paid. That is very straightforward because we agreed upfront for the share for that work package. And then at the end of the project, we are going to make a final payment. Ideally, of course, we pay all the remaining work packages that have not been completed. Exceptionally, at the end of the project, there's also the possibility of a partial payment for partially completed work packages. So that was maybe also one of the misunderstandings that we've had for some time. I want to really make clear we fully understand it is theoretically possible that we don't pay a work package. But so far, I think this has been extremely rare. I'm not even sure if we had a single case so far. Rather, what happens in case you haven't been able to really fully finish your project or fully finish all work packages is that one or other work package may be paid partially. In case you've done 80% of the activities of a work package, we are not going to pay nothing. No, we're going to pay 80%. We are then going to agree on the degree of completion that you have achieved with this work package and pay this share. So it's not a black and white, all or nothing approach. It is rather an approach where we pay the degree that has been completed, and there is a process to agree on what this share is. As in all other projects, of course, we are also going to release the amount that was retained for the mutual insurance mechanism. Again, there's no difference compared with other projects. Amendments, I think I could also keep very short, saying that by now amendments work in exactly the same way as in all grants. So the procedure for Horizon 2020 lump sum grants has still be a little bit more involved, but now for Horizon Europe, amendments and lump sum grants work essentially exactly in the same way as for all other grants, and the same conditions apply, the same standards. Whatever can be amended in an actual cost grant can also be amended in a lump sum grant, and we apply no different standards in what is acceptable as an amendment. So the only caveat I should make is that for those lump sum work packages that you have already reported complete and that we have paid, these are really considered as parts of the project that are behind us and that are closed off, and those cannot be amended anymore because we have done the payment, you have completed the work package. We are not looking at that part of the project anymore, but all the ongoing work packages and the associated lump sums, there we can have amendments up to the end of the project. I already mentioned, and you see here in the graph, what it means to report. And this is really where the main simplification now comes in. At the interim period, you can report work packages as complete or as not complete. And then if we agree, we're going to pay. At the end of the project, I mentioned already, you have the additional possibility to report a work package as partially complete. This option is also shown here in the example. And then you can also, and you should then, indicate the percentage that you consider this work package has been completed. Very important point to make here is that completion really is based on the activities that you carried out, not on the objectives that you reached or on the success that you had with this project or with this work package. So we are not making payments dependent on being successful in the sense of reaching given scientific or technological objectives, but rather, because those are never certain in research, but we are basing them on you having carried out the activities that were agreed and that are described in the grant agreement. So that is the measuring stick. Have you done the work that you promised to be doing? Whether the outcome is successful, now that is of course always desirable, we all wish for that, but that is not what is going to decide over payment, partial payment or non-payment. And now when you have reported and we have agreed on which work packages are final and are indeed accepted as complete, the rest is fully automated, and this is where the simplification comes in. There is no financial report really beyond for the coordinator to declare which work packages have been completed. The financial statement is automatically generated. The system can easily do that because we know how much each work package is worth. And once it's clear which ones have been accepted, the financial statement is generated for the whole consortium, including the payment and the accepted amount. So this is really straightforward. There is no financial report anymore as such, and you have no obligation to keep the financial records. Now, since the acceptance of work packages triggers your payment, there is maybe the question of now what really is accepted, what is an acceptable work package? Generally speaking, I mentioned already, of course, our expectation is that you carry out the work as it has been described. But we know that this is not always possible to the last I-dot and really to the last percent. What we mean here is that you essentially need to carry out the project as it's been described, but you can deviate, you can also perform equivalent work, you can justify deviations, and these can be accepted, and they will be accepted on the same footing, applying the same standards as those deviations can also be accepted in actual cost grants. There is no different standards here between lump sum grants and actual cost grants. We are not expecting lump sum grants to perform to a higher level than actual cost grants. There's really absolutely no basis for that. So despite the fact that completed work packages is what triggers the payment in lump sum grants, we of course expect all our grants to be properly implemented, which implies that the work has to be done as described in the grant agreement. Now, if you see that some of your work packages will be difficult to complete for technological scientific reasons because there was progress outside the project and or developments in the project that make this impossible, of course, as in all grants, we invite you to amend your lump sum grant and to amend these work packages to align them with the necessities of the scientific technological development such that the work still makes sense and such that you can complete the amended work package. I already mentioned what we accept as amendment here is the same as in all grants. Again, there is no special treatment of lump sum grants or actual cost grants. Now, of course, it could still after this happen that a work package is rejected. If that is happening, you will always have the possibility to respond to the observations of the project officer and tell them why you believe, in fact, it is complete. The project officer will take this into account and then take a final decision. Now, if the decision to reject your work package is upheld, that only means in an interim payment that we are not paying it at this point in time. It's not really a rejection forever. It means that you have the chance to complete this work package at a later stage, report it at a later reporting period, at which point it can then be paid. It is only at the end of the project that we allow you to declare work packages as partially completed. The reason is that we really want you to complete all work packages because we want you to complete the full project. And therefore, if a work package was not of sufficient quality that you reported at an interim reporting period, we want you to improve on it and to report the full work package later, at which point it can certainly be accepted. We, in practice, see this happening rarely, but absolutely it happens. In about 2% perhaps of the work packages that are reported at interim, we have a rejection, but most of those are then paid and accepted at a later stage. Here you see what happens at the final stage, really. We've had some 665 lump sum grants so far that have been closed by September 24, and in those we had maybe 1,600 work packages that were paid. And you see that at final payment we paid 99% of those as they were declared, in other words, in full consensus with the consortium, with the grantees, and 1% were partially rejected, which really means that they were paid to a degree. I mean, they were not fully rejected, they were partially paid, and partial payment in almost all cases means that the rejection, or that the reduction, I should say, is maybe in the order of 5 to 20, 25%. But very large reductions are also quite rare, and I think we've had almost no cases where work packages were rejected in full. I already mentioned at intermediate payment, it's quite rare that we reject work packages, and if it happens, these work packages are paid later. So in summary, we see that the controls we do both at evaluation stage and at payment stage, they work. Some of the projects see a correction or they see a reduction at final payments, but the big majority of lump sum projects have no reduction at either evaluation stage or at payment stage. In other words, the lump sum that they get is exactly what they proposed. So we see no evidence for increased financial risk of beneficiaries. The financial situation overall that we generate with this system is extremely similar, if maybe even slightly more advantageous than the actual cost grant situation for applicants. But I mean, even if there are tiny differences, I would say the key message here is it is extremely similar what comes out. The controls after your grant. Generally speaking, of course, all non-financial aspects of the grant can be controlled in the same way as in all other grants. First and foremost, the proper implementation, that is through a technical review. This possibility exists in all grants because all grants have the obligation to be properly implemented. And since this is what's triggering payment, we are going to pay particular attention in lump sum grants. But then you also need to comply with all the other non-financial obligations, such as patent IPR obligations, ethics, open science, dissemination, exploitation obligations. There are a number of so-called non-financial obligations in the grant agreement. They are identical in all our grant agreements, no difference for lump sums, and of course they need to be complied with, and this can also be checked ex post. But there will be no financial checks, no financial reviews, and no financial audits because by the EU services, because your lump sum model grant agreement does not oblige you to keep any of those records, and therefore they can also not be requested and they cannot be checked. Very rarely I hear about cases where some of our services would still have asked you for financial reports. This is very unusual, or this should indeed not happen. And it would be, if such cases really occur, I invite you to report them, for example, to the Research Inquiry Service. They will probably find their way to us, and then we can follow up on that. There is indeed no legal basis to ask for financial reporting of any kind in a lump sum grant. For keeping records, situation is quite simple. On the left-hand side, you see what you need to keep, and that is the technical documents or any documentation that show that you have completed the project, that you have done the activities, and this is that you have implemented the activities as described, and this is the same for all grants. The article in the model grant agreement, I can only say, is exactly identical to that in that of actual cost grants. No difference. You need to be in a position to show with supporting documents that you carried out the work. This could also include any documentation that's needed under good research practices, for example, lab books or logs of equipment, whatever is applicable in your field of research and innovation to show that the work actually took place. But what you don't need anymore, and that you see on the right-hand side, is any kind of documentation that is needed to demonstrate and report actual costs. First and foremost, you don't need anymore any timesheets, you don't need any contracts or payslips, you don't need to show invoices. Anything that is needed to demonstrate actual cost is not needed because you're not going to report them and we're not going to ask for this documentation for the project. What I should point out is that you may still have obligations outside the grant agreement vis-à-vis your organization or in the context of national law. These obligations are not touched by our grant agreement, obviously, and you still have to follow up on them. What I'm just saying, is valid vis-à-vis in the relation for the contract between the commission services and your organization. Now, for any further information, you will find a lot of additional guidance on our central lump sum funding page on the Funding and Tenders portal. I really recommend for people that are new to lump sum funding to start with the video tutorials. They really give a good overview of what lump sum funding is about and the main tricks and tips, what it needs to set up your proposal and get a general understanding. But then there's also more detailed guidance. I'm not going to go through the various documents available here, but you will find all of that on our lump sum funding page on the portal. There's also, I already mentioned, the Research Inquiry Service. You'll find the address here and also on the Funding and Tenders portal. For any questions, including on lump sum funding about Horizon Europe and research funding, you can contact them via this web form. And then last not least, let me mention current developments. Lump sum funding, after all, is still, relatively speaking, new, and we are still developing some elements. So as I already mentioned, we are continuously monitoring the lump sum grants we have in Horizon, and that includes that we've just published a new assessment about a month ago on the portal. You can find it here through this link, or if you go to the news sections on the portal, you will find the new assessment, which generally showed that the popularity of lump sums that we found in 2021 and our first assessment has been fully confirmed now based on a much broader basis of users and a much broader basis of data available. So we are relatively confident that lump sum funding works and is popular among the users who already have experience with it. Then for the ex post control, we are developing and are nearly ready with launching the first technical reviews for lump sum grants. In principle, this is nothing new. It's a variant of the existing project reviews because the main purpose of this is to verify that the project was implemented as described in the grant agreement, as agreed. Then we are, and that is maybe for applicants a bigger development, will probably come in 2025 to replace the Excel table with an IT system in the submission system on the Funding and Tenders portal. So there would be no Excel sheet necessary anymore. This would be effectively a more involved version of the table that we currently see for the actual cost grants with all the functions, the extra functions we need for lump sum grants. And here at the bottom, you see that we started rolling out lump sums quite slowly in 2021 at the beginning of Horizon Europe. At that time, we only had 2%. Many stakeholders were asking to be careful with lump sums as they were new and had only been tested since 2018. This is what we in fact did, and we used that time to improve our guidance and to improve our tools and systems. And then from 23 onwards, we have been using it more significantly. We are now in 2024 using nearly 30% of the Horizon budget for lump sum grants, and we intend to further increase this until 27 to a share of 50%. So lump sums have been starting slowly in Horizon Europe, but we are rolling them out to a very significant degree and making them into a funding system on equal footing with the actual cost grants. So they're really going to be a mainstream funding instrument, just like the other funding models we have available. With this, I'm at the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. We are now going to invite our guests, and Andreia is going to take us through this section.
Thank you, Ulrich. Good morning, everyone. As in our previous editions, we will have now a panel discussion. And we are very happy to welcome our speaker guests who are directly involved in lump sum grants and can share their useful experiences and lessons learned with us. And so I'm welcoming Carlos Escudero Oñate, Head of Department of European Affairs and Business Development at the Institute for Energy Technology in Oslo. I'm also welcoming Agnieszka Galeczewska, EU advisor at the same institution. And last but not least, Marianne Umvisa-Tofte, EU project controller at the same research organizations. So all the three speakers are working together, and they're part of the team that is coordinating two lump sum projects under Horizon Europe. So in the next minutes, we will have together a discussion on the practical aspects of lump sum funding. And if those who are following online have some specific questions directed to our guests, so if you want to know more about their experience so far with lump sum funding, do not hesitate to put your question directly in Slido, and we will allocate it afterwards to our guest speakers. Because they will also stay with us for the Q&A session afterwards. So now I would like to start with an introductory question for our guests. So could you please introduce yourself and one of the lump sum projects that you are coordinating? At what stage is it now? When did it start?
Well, I can start with this. First of all, thanks a lot for inviting us to join this lump sum webinar. We are delighted to participate. As Andreia already mentioned, my name is Carlos Escudero, and I am the head of European Affairs here at the Institute for Energy Technology in Norway. With me is Agnieszka, we call her Aga, and Marianne, that are advisors in the European Department also. About the projects, we are implementing nowadays 2 lump sums already, and we are in negotiation of other 2 lump sums. We are in grant agreement preparation phase. I'm going to check the other slide, the other side of the screen, because I have it here. The first one that we got is a project called Retrieve, that it's dealing with end of life management of photovoltaic modules, and it's managed by CINEA, by the agency CINEA, the European Commission. This one has a total budget approximately from the EC of 7 million euros. And on top of that, since it's an innovation action, it comes the contribution from the for-profit partners, from the industrial partners mainly. This project is relatively new. We kick it off, if I remember correctly, almost 1 year ago in October 2023. And please, if not, Aga and Marianne, just jump in and comment. So we are in month 12 of the implementation of the retrieve. This project is going to last for 42 months, so this is 3 years and a half, and contains 16 partners, including widening regions also. So it's relatively complex project. The other one is called Resource, and it's dealing with the carbonized and sustainable mining mineral extraction in Europe. Here, really, the carbon dioxide stays on top of the priorities of the project. This one is managed by another agency. It's not CINEA. In this case, it's HABEA, the European Health and Digital Executive Agency. This is smaller than Retrieve. It's approximately 5 million euros and counts with 11 partners. It contained the United Kingdom as associated, but has been taken out in the grant agreement preparation phase. Besides that, there are the implementation. Well, the resource started the 1st of December last year, so it's not 1 year still of the implementation of the project, and it's also 42 months. The two others that we are in grant agreement preparation are remedies, that it's about hydrogen absorption in ferrous materials, and it's managed by the Clean Hydrogen Partnership. And the last one that we are also coordinating, it's called Sprint and belongs to the BAT4EU partnership with a total budget of about 7 million euros. Here we are running, it's quite balanced. We have 2 innovation actions and 2 research and innovation actions. So we have been exposed to the preparation of lump sum structures, including the budgeting part that was a bit complex at the beginning for these 2 main programs, RIAS and IAS. I think I covered already the first question, Andrea, about introduction, start, and stage.
Okay, thank you so much, Carlos. And we can go maybe to some more specific questions on proposal preparation and grant management. So I'm curious to know what was your approach to selecting the partners in your consortium. You mentioned that some of the projects are involving partners from different organizations. And did your lump sum require a different consortium agreement than other grants?
Yes. Well, about the approach to selecting the partners, I have to say that to the participants that perhaps the most important is to not change at all the regular methodologies that we were following for the typical annotated grant agreement. The methodology is the same. Here, a common mistake that we have observed through participation in projects with lump sum structure that we have not been coordinating is that the consortium has been shaped in a different way, trying to accommodate, let's say, factors not directly related to the excellence and the breakthrough capacity of the project. From my perspective, and I am coordinating more than 11 projects now and running in parallel together with Marianne, Aga, and the researchers, more than 50 European projects at IFE, is that the principles to prepare a good lump sum project should be the same as those that we had in the regular annotated grant agreement. Do not try to accommodate partners for reasons different than those related to putting the excellence in the project, supporting the outcomes, the goals, and the impacts that are listed in the call, or let's say the pillars of the participation or the pillars of the preparation of the European proposal. This should not be the lump sum structure should not be a factor to skip or put aside the primary concepts of the participation in European projects or the concept of the European project. And we always have to address the excellence and address the impacts, the scope, the objectives as listed, regardless on the funding structure.
Okay, thank you. That's interesting. And as a follow-up question to still related to proposal preparation, since you are now preparing some new lump sum grants, so you are at the step of the grant agreement preparation.
Yes.
What would you say about preparing the proposals for these new ones, since you already prepared some other proposals that were selected for funding some years ago, like more than 1 year ago. Do you think it was easier for you to prepare this new lump sum proposal?
Yes, it's much easier. It's much easier. Let's say that the difficulties at the beginning was somehow getting known to the mechanism of the lump sum and what really the lump sum is supposed for the implementation of the project. And for the first one that I was coordinating in the lump sum structure, the retrieve, I remember, was quite complex to understand the Excel sheet that has to be downloaded that contains all these macros and all these elements that are a bit unusual in our regular template for preparing budgets. This is prepared by you guys at the European Commission. It took me, perhaps 1 day to understand what this thing was about, Googling some things here and there about how to deactivate macros. It was not that straightforward for me. But then once, let's say, when you prepare the first budget for the first beneficiary in this Excel for the lump sum structure, all the others are quite straightforward. And I have to say that this Excel sheet is quite robust, is quite well designed. And at the end, what you see already in the summaries that come out from this Excel, you see a very good, let's say, summary about how the implementation is going to be. You can see in detail how much budget is going to be allocated to each one of the VPs, and you can check also how much sense does it, or perhaps it doesn't make sense at all. You might be allocating too many person months or at a high person month rate to our package where perhaps it's unnecessary. And this is something that also the reviewers are going to check. And eventually they are going to come back in the best case with a comment for you. But from our perspective and our experience in coordinating a lot of European projects, we even want to avoid these potential negative comments from the reviewers, and we do it bulletproof already in the budgeting phase, allocating the right amount of effort to the work packages, making everything proportional to the dedication that the project implementation requires.
Thank you. And one question now regarding the grant implementation. So taking into account your experience so far in implementing these lump sum grants, what would you advise other lump sum coordinators regarding the management of their project?
For the management of the project itself, I would recommend not to deviate much from the classical methodologies that we had in regular annotated grant agreements. We are fully aware, and my advisors here, Aga and Marianne, are fully aware that the follow-up or the responsibilities when it comes to finances are not going to be the same. But our approach on how is to follow the implementation very closely from both the technical layer that is taken by the scientists of IFE and at the financial layer that is taken by us at the European Department with support of Aga and Marianne. So even though the commitments on the reporting are not going to be as tight, we can say, or as strict as in a regular annotated grant agreement, we consider that it's very important for the implementation to track exactly what the partners are doing. And this means somehow setting the connection between the usage of the financial resources and the outcomes produced by the project, regardless on this is a lump sum structure or an annotated grant agreement. We can see that it's just that we don't want the project to run wild. We don't want to release the pre-financing once we get it from the European Commission and we distribute among the partners. And our approach is always to track and to follow up that the technical implementation is following exactly what we wrote in the grant agreement. This, I have to say, I took a note to mention something that might be very relevant for the participants also. This is especially important in projects connected to somehow research outcomes for industries that are experiencing some turbulences nowadays in Europe, or that can be severely affected by external factors. Here I'm talking mainly about, for instance, the photovoltaic value chains that we know are quite shaky because of the China dominance in all the manufacturing and so on, but also in the battery segment, where we see that China is doing quite a lot of process. The implementation should be done according to what was described, but we know that partners, especially industrial, that are exposed to this value chain can have some financial consequences either at the early stages of the project or later on. This is something that we appraise already when we prepare the lump sum structure, and I really recommend the partners to somehow check a due diligence or evaluate the financial capacity of the partners to deliver, because at the end of the day you are setting down a contract with them, and they are supposed to commit to implement the action according to a given expectation for 3, 4, or even 5 years. So follow up very, very closely these partners, especially, as I said, if they are involved in these segments where the competence outside is fierce. And even though the finances in the lump sum structure are are not that tight, always try to follow up and support the partner in the implementation, understanding the expenses, what is equipment, what is infrastructure, what can be allocated to travel expenses, what can be allocated to other items. This is somehow the message.
Okay, thank you very much, Carlos, for sharing your experiences. It's very interesting. I don't have any other question now for you. So I would like again to thank all of you for your availability, for joining us today. And I hope you you will also be able to take some questions later on. So I encourage again our audience, if you want to know more about some specific practical aspects of lump sum funding, and also which is relevant to the experience from our speakers, please put your questions in Slido or maybe upvote the existing ones. So also check the rest of the questions there. And we will answer to all of these. Well, not to all of these probably, but to some of them in the second part of the webinar. So we will now take a short break of 5 minutes, and we will return afterwards. Thank you.
Thanks.
Welcome back to our lump sum webinar, and now we are going to start with the Q&A session, as announced, going through the questions you put in Slido by order of popularity. And we hope that our guests can help us answer these questions. First question: can we make budget transfers between work packages without an official amendment? Now, that's a rather simple question. Any change that you do to the grant agreement, and of course the lump sum shares are part of your grant agreement, can only be done with an amendment. You can never change the grant agreement without amending it. However, this is what I tried to get across in my presentation. You are not bound to make an amendment as long as you carry out the project. So you can, inside the consortium, use the lump sum in any way you like, and we will pay the full lump sum as long as you carry out and as long as you do the work as described. But as soon as you would like to reflect in the grant agreement the changes that may have happened, in other words, one work package got bigger, another one got smaller, one beneficiary does more work, another beneficiary does less work. These changes are all possible, and they can also be reflected in the grant agreement in this budget breakdown. But in that case, if you want to have them in a new version of the grant agreement, there is no way then to do an amendment. I hope this is answering the question. This is a rather formal one. So yes, if you are happy and you are sure that you can carry out the project as described, well, there is no need. If you change the project, if there are changes in the financial schedule in Annex 2 that you really want also to be reflected there, because that is mostly then actually in the interest of the consortium, not really in the interest of the Commission services, then you need to amend it, of course. Like you would also need to amend the grant agreement in case there are substantial changes in the work you are doing. Next question, please. Andrea, would you like to start with this?
So, in interim reports, how to report budget execution without financial figures, and how to report budget deviations in cost effects and financial management section. Once again, I would like to highlight that in lump sum grants, you don't need to report on costs and resources. The only thing that you will need to report is on the technical progress of your project, and for the financial reporting, you only need to declare which work packages were completed or not at the end of the reporting period. And as mentioned by Ulrich just earlier, if there are some significant, let's say, budget deviations, maybe in the work packages or between the partners, you should do an amendment. But as long as you implement the project as it is described in the grant agreement, there is really no need for that. So for this amendment, but to if you want to formalize this, you should make it. So I think this is all.
Yeah, no, I think really we can summarize. I think there's a misunderstanding underlying that question. Since there is no financial reporting and you are not reporting, budget execution is simply not reported. What you report is the project execution, we could say, and that is the scientific, technical progress and the reporting on what has actually been done. So that is the only thing that you report and against which we make payments. There is no financial reporting as far as the grant agreement is concerned. Maybe we can go to the next question. So yeah, that's a complicated one. And what happens in case that Olaf comes in? Now, Olaf is the anti-fraud institution of the EU, and they, of course, they retain the audit rights for all EU budget, all spending. They have the right to do audits. However, also here, in case of lump sum grants, they are not requiring you to produce records of that specific projects. However, they could still have the right to audit your financial records in general to see if those are, if indeed you did, for example, misrepresent information in the proposal. That would be a case of fraud, that you provided figures and made us believe that certain costs are reasonable, while in fact they were not existing at all, or they are, in other words, there's gross misrepresentation, and that can be found not by looking at records of this particular relating to this particular lump sum project, but rather looking at your general accounts and see what your general cost structure is. So in this case, the organization gets audited, and we can check if, and Olaf can check if indeed the setup of this organization and the general cost structure in this organization is indeed in line with what you have proposed in your lump sum budget. But I repeat, this is not a specific financial audit as you know it in actual cost grants for the financial records for that given project. Because your grant agreement explicitly exempts you from the obligation to keep those records, you will also not have to produce them even when Olaf would have, let's say, an anti-fraud audit. Next question.
Oh,
Maybe Andrea?
yeah. Is it really so that work effort, person months, does not need to be tracked either in any way for technical reporting or potential audits? So indeed, under the lump sum grant agreement obligations, you don't have to report on this, also on person months, on resources in general. Of course, if you have some other, some outside obligations, let's say, so for your internal procedures or under national law, you may still need to report on this. But as far as the grant agreement is concerned, so with the granting authorities, you don't need to track this. You know, you don't need to provide any timesheet for this.
Yeah.
So we can go.
I think this is relatively clear. There is no reporting of person months. Well, whether you want to track them again internally, that is another question, but you do not report them. And there is not going to be there's not going to be a need to produce, for example, timesheets in case of a technical review, because you had no obligation to keep timesheets. And so that goes without saying. Then therefore we cannot afterwards come and ask for timesheets or other ways of tracking your person months. Next question. Do you want to take that on the pre-financing?
So how do we know what the pre-financing will be? Well, this is an easy question. So the pre-financing is calculated in the same way as for any Horizon Europe grant. So in a lump sum grant, the pre-financing is a percentage of the lump sum amount reported to the reporting periods. So, for example, a lump sum grant with one reporting period will have normally 80% of pre-financing. And for projects that have two or more reporting periods, it is usually 160% of the average EU funding divided by the number of reporting periods. So this is the way how it is calculated, and it is fixed in the grant agreement. So you will have this percentage there, and then the pre-financing will be distributed by the coordinator of the lump sum grant to the rest of the consortium partners. Thank you.
Yes, I think I'm not sure if you mentioned the percentages. So it's really for projects with 1 or 2 reporting periods, you are going to have normally you will have 80%. For projects with 3 reporting periods, it's 53%. For projects with 4 reporting periods, it's 40%. And I think it's extremely rare that we have more than 4 reporting periods. So it would be really 80% for 1 or 2 reporting periods, 53% for 3 reporting periods, and 40% for 4 reporting periods. That's I think the percentage you can expect. And let's highlight again, there is no difference between lump sums and actual costs in this regard. They are treated exactly the same in this regard. Next question. Now that is really a question that is entirely unrelated to lump sums, because and even unrelated to your model grant agreement that you have with the commission services, because, well, what's the consortium agreement, where you have agreed on how the coordinator manages the payments that the coordinator gets from the commission. That is not an agreement that we are part of. So that's really between the partners of a consortium. And therefore, well, if I'm not very mistaken, according to the grant agreement, the coordinator has the obligation to distribute the budget such that the project can be properly implemented. But beyond that, there is room for maneuver, and there may be indeed details in your consortium agreement. And I couldn't comment on that, except that, well, that has nothing to do with whether you are in a lump sum grant or in an actual cost grant. Can't really say much more on that. Next question, please.
Okay, I can take it. If a deliverable is rejected and the work package is considered partially completed, who decides the amount of funding that is reduced, and to which partner? If it is the European Commission, what are the criteria? So once again, a work package can be declared as partially completed only at the final reporting period. Who decides the amount of funding will be in base of the percentage that is declared. So first of all, the consortium will declare a percentage of completion for that work package. Then the project officer will assess if the work has been done to the degree that was declared, so to the percentage that was declared, and this is in base, of course, of the technical reporting, that is submitted by the consortium. So in this report, you need to explain who did what. So which partner did the work, did the activity in which work package. So that is easier to know who implemented the actual activity. So indeed, it is the project officer who will assess this. As for any other, for any other assessment of work packages, and they may agree with the percentage that was declared, or in case if they consider that the work has been completed to a lesser degree, they will propose a lower percentage of completion.
So the final decision is obviously, as for payments always, is taken by the Commission, who decides which percentage is accepted. And maybe as a general principle, we are not, this is again in lump sum funding, not based at all on cost considerations, but only on the consideration of how many of the tasks that were described for this work package have been completed and how many have not been completed. Now, this can again not be a process where we come to where we can calculate this to the euro, but that is not the point here. In lump sum funding, we then want to have the best reasonable estimate of what was done, to what degree was this completed, and which part was not completed. Sometimes this can be relatively easy because the work package is broken down into a number of tasks, and we can clearly see which of those tasks have been completed and which haven't. So, and in other cases it may be more complicated, but in all cases we will make the assessment based on how many of the activities have been completed and how many haven't. That is the measuring stick here. But of course, this is a process where the beneficiaries they make the first proposal of what, as Andreia said, what they consider would be just. And this gets evaluated, and then there is a ping pong. There's a process where we exchange arguments, and then the final decision on that amount is taken by the Commission. On the question maybe on which partner. Now, in the first place, by default, we would reduce the work package that was not completed, and then all the partners involved in that work package would be affected. However, there can also be situations, depending on the evidence that is there, where it is clear that the failure to complete the work package is really due to one partner only. And the others, in fact, have completed all their activities in that work package, in which case, indeed, it is possible to assign that reduction specifically to only that one partner who didn't do their work. That would be, of course, dependent on having the necessary evidence on who actually did what, and there might also be disagreement inside the consortium on that. But as long as it's clear, this indeed is a possible consequence. But I say again, the first approach is the consortium is collectively responsible to carry out the project, and if it's clear that a certain work package hasn't been fully completed, the reduction will be pro rata across that work package and pro rata across the participants in that work package, according to the latest version of the grant agreement that is valid at the moment of making this payment. So let's maybe go to the next question from Michaelis. That is, maybe colleagues can switch to the next question. Yes. So the question is there any obligation to report that the work in work packages has been carried out by the partners budgeted for in the work package? Now, that first question I interpret like, no, you don't have a strict obligation that indeed the work is carried out exactly by the partners who were, let's say, which are, according to the grant agreement, responsible for those tasks. The first responsibility you have is as a consortium to carry out all these tasks, whoever is actually carrying them out. But then you also have an obligation to describe who did what. So especially if you deviate from the grant agreement and, the different tasks have been carried out by, certain tasks have been carried out by people other than those, or organizations, partners other than those mentioned in the grant agreement, this has to be explained. Because in our technical report, there's a section where work package by work package, you explain the activities that have been carried out and who carried them out. And now specifically, so yeah, you need to tell us who did what, and this would actually have to be also you'd have to be able to show that later on in case of the technical review, that indeed the work was carried out by the people that as reported. So we would then check this against the grant agreement and against what you have reported to us. So this you should be able to show that indeed that your technical report is of course reflecting the reality. And if there's a deviation, you highlight that deviation, and that can in most cases certainly be accepted, because the aim is for you to carry out as a collective consortium to carry out all of the tasks. Subcontracting is a special case. Of course, subcontracting is possible in lump sum grants exactly like in all other grants, but you have to have this is a special category. You have to basically normally include all subcontracts in the grant agreement, and you can also add, normally you have them first of all in the proposal, and if they evaluated positively, they are included in the grant agreement. All your subcontracts, you can add new subcontracts during the grant. In that case, you have, like in actual cost grants, two possibilities. Either you amend the grant to add a new subcontract, or you report your new subcontract by way of a deviation, if you like. If in your technical report you say we've used a new subcontract for certain tasks, you describe the tasks. If the report is accepted, those new subcontractors are accepted as well. That's the simplified procedure. We can accept deviations either by way of a formal amendment or by way of you reporting those deviations in the technical report. If that gets accepted, then that's fine. That in a way replaces the amendment, and that's also possible for adding a new subcontract. But of course, you have in your reporting, you have to be honest. You have to properly reflect who did what, and that includes the tasks carried out by subcontractors. And again, also that would ex post you would have to be in a position to show that that these subcontractors actually did the work that you assigned to them. Next question. Maybe
I had a comment.
Sure.
I raised my hand, but it didn't go through.
I'm sorry, I don't see your raised hand. Please come in.
Yeah, it was about the previous question actually. When one of the participants, or one of the participants in the meeting asked about the implementation and a work package that is not fully complete and so on. First of all, perhaps just stressing the message of yours, Ulrich, and to track the implementation as much as possible, even though we don't have the commitments to go to the finances. And just mention to the participants that, again, a key role in the implementation of the action is the role of the coordinator. No one better than us knows what is going on in the project and who are the partners that might pose some challenges to the implementation. So at the end of the day, we will have, of course, we have the General Assembly, we have the steering committee, we have to talk to them, but the coordinators have also the possibility to take or suggest decisions that sometimes are very hard for the consortiums. Here, many times we see that participants do not deliver according to expectations, not because they don't want to. It's because they are entering very hard financial processes, such as bankruptcies or things like that. These kind of processes should be communicated primarily to us, to the coordinators, before even mentioned to the consortium. This has huge implications to the implementation, and regretfully, the reduction of grant is there. And sometimes even bringing part of the pre-financing or things like that. But it's just to stress the role of you as coordinators to secure that the implementation is according to the contract that we have with the European Commission. And also extremely important to have a very solid, a very robust consortium agreement, so that in case this risk related to the non-compliance materializes, you do have written a good consortium agreement that reflects the actions that we as coordinators are going to take against, let's say, the partner that cannot deliver. Was just this from my end. Thank you.
No, I think thanks very much. That makes perfect sense, and I think comes back to what I said towards the end of my presentation, that in the implementation of your project, make use of the management tools you have, in particular also of amending the grant as necessary. If you have the case that you have a defaulting partner or a partner that has to leave the consortium, of course that is a situation when you will have to amend the grant agreement, because then, well, that partner will have to be excised from the grant agreement. Maybe you will have a new partner entering and replacing that partner. That is not really lump sum specific. That you would also have in the same way in an actual cost agreement. In a lump sum situation, perhaps it can be even more important to be to place yourself in a position where you can complete the work packages, because that is what's going to trigger your payments. So if you have work package descriptions in the grant agreement where you know those I will never be able to complete the way they are written there right now, because this is what we conceived maybe 3 or 4 years ago when we wrote the proposal. If now you realize it cannot be done like this anymore, that would definitely be a situation when it's quite advisable to change and amend the grant agreement such that you are in a position to implement it, which does of course not mean that you can cut corners. The replacement, whatever you do instead of what was initially planned, needs to be equivalent. But again, I stress what we accept as amendments and changes in the course of the project, in the implementation, the technical scientific implementation of the project, is the same as in all other projects. And so here we know that in research and innovation, this room for maneuver has to be quite generous in order to accommodate the changes that may occur in the course of 3, 4, 5 years. Maybe we can go to the next question.
Yes, thank you. So how to handle a situation where a beneficiary leaves the consortium and the work packages in which they were involved are not completed? What costs could be transferred to a new beneficiary? So first of all, in this case, there is no need to do financial reporting because the work packages were not completed. So any amount due to this beneficiary that left the consortium and did some work for these work packages will be paid out to the coordinator once these work packages will be declared as completed and accepted as such. So the coordinator will be the job of the coordinator to distribute these payments to the leaving beneficiary. And then secondly, as also mentioned before, you will need to do an amendment which will determine the redistribution of activities and also of the budget to maybe to a new beneficiary or to the remaining beneficiary. So this will be decided in the amendment of Annex 2 of the Financial Grant Agreement. Maybe I would ask Carlos if you had such a situation, and if yes, could you share some more with us?
Regretfully, yes. Regretfully, yes. This is the short answer. Again, as I mentioned previously, or as I stressed in the lump sum preparation, it's are partners that are somehow associated to value chains that are a bit unstable, but also extremely important and critical in Europe. How to deal with this situation? Here I'm reflecting to you. I have 3 cases in 3 different projects. One that was quite sound because of the size of the grant that this partner got and the relevance in the project. What we have to do first when these things happen is to trigger the mitigation action. The mitigation action, specifically for this kind of risk, in my case, it's listed in the number 1 in the table of risk mitigation already in the proposal, and it's partner leaving the consortium. The first thing is to understand what is happening with the partner, which are the challenges that the partner is experiencing for the implementation. And when a partner, my experience is when they trigger this process, normally there is no way back. They will pull out from the project and that's it. So the mitigation action should be, first of all, try to stretch a bit the competencies existing in the consortium and try to accommodate as much as possible of the workload and assignments this partner had into the other partners, including the coordinator in case you have, let's say, a broad spectrum of capacities. So this is definitely the first one. If we go for this process, naturally, as the European Commission has mentioned, we have to trigger an amendment, and the amendment will consist on a set of actions. Basically, we describe how the risk is mitigated and how we want to transfer the activities from one partner to another, and the financial consequences. We have to transfer the budget from one partner to another. In our case, one of the partners, the issue was that it was quite large, and we had to use 4 partners existing in the consortium to take over the activities, plus 2 external partners that are going to enter the consortium in order to cover that. Here, the key, as in any other project, regardless on its lump sum or an annotated grant agreement, the key takeout that I would like you to get is get in touch with your project officer and have a transparent and clear dialogue with him or with her. It's extremely important to do this in cooperation with the European Commission and naturally with your consortium, trying to identify who can take over what and eventually those that need to enter the project in order to take over. From my experience with the European Commission, with these processes, with INEA and with JADEA, is that they are extremely supportive. The process, I have to say, still remains a bit long and tedious and quite bureaucratic, but it's definitely doable. So even though the risk can be done as project threatening, normally it's not like that, and there are ways to overcome the problems associated to the partner that is leaving the consortium through those existing and eventually others succeeding from Europe.
Thanks, Carlos. Okay, I think let's go to the next question. Do lump sum grant coordinators receive clear guidance and requirements not to request their partners actual cost calculations for short interim periods of 6 to 9 months? No, they don't, because, well, again, the agreements that you have inside the consortium, the Commission is not part of that. So this is indeed, we as a Commission do not require any financial reporting. What you do inside the consortium, that is really up to the consortium to agree in the consortium agreement. Now, whether there's a lot of value in having 6 monthly financial reports, let's say, in lump sum grants, I would personally doubt very much, but there is no such guidance because we do not provide guidance on the exact relationship between partners and consortium and coordinators in our projects. That is for a separate agreement, the consortium agreement. And maybe we can have Carlos comment on that. He's an experienced coordinator. I don't know, did you get any guidance, or would you expect guidance on how to on how to manage your consortium?
You mean for this short interim period, 6 to 9 months?
Yeah, I'm not sure how to interpret the question exactly, but I imagine they refer to a situation where a coordinator is asking the partners of the consortium to do some internal reporting of maybe providing their actual cost consumption every half year, for example. I mean, this is, from the Commission side, I can only say this is certainly not a requirement that we have, and you are certainly not reporting this to the Commission. If such thing is agreed upon as a practice in a consortium, I don't think that my position would be this is not necessary, but there's also nothing that we could stop it. It's simply a separate agreement. Your working arrangements inside the consortium is really up to the consortium to agree in the consortium agreement. The Commission does not interfere.
Exactly. I think a matter like this is not presented in the grant agreement as such, in the agreement that we have with you guys at the European Commission.
No.
In case a given coordinator wants us to provide information in 6-9 months period, it should be regulated through the consortium agreement. The 4 lump sums that we are running now, the 2 that we have and the 2 that are coming, 3 of them are coordinated by us, by IFE. And only 1 is coordinated by an external partner. No, sorry. Actually, the four of those are coordinated by us, right? Aga and Marianne, I think we are the coordinators in all 4. We don't impose these conditions to the partners, and actually, our reporting periods, Aga and Marianne, are at least 1 year. No, you can comment.
There are 18 and 12 months, but we don't ask for internal reporting, which we do in the other projects, because we don't have to obviously submit this to the European Commission. But we follow closely on the technical to make sure that we are aware of the costs and what they're doing, and that they really are doing the work according to what they've written in the grant agreement.
Thank you.
And as far,
Agnieszka?
And as far as the guidance goes, well, in the very beginning, we were actually wondering how to do it, and we had the same questions as the participants have at the moment. But as we didn't know exactly how the reporting would look like, but now when the guidelines for reporting is available, we know more how to handle the process on the way.
Take into account also here that our projects, even at the financial part, when we prepare the budget, we go very deep into the assessment of the credibility of the action suggested by the partner. So we do a very deep appraisal on the necessity of having this partner doing this activity for this budget. And we go also quite deep into the assessment of the personnel costs. We are following the rules of the European Commission related to the budgeting of the personnel costs. And we check that the personnel costs somehow reflected by the partners are in compliance with the databases that you have at the European Commission, but also ourselves internally. Now we are coordinating about 170 partners, I would say, from the portfolio, and cooperating with perhaps more than 300 out there in the 50 European projects that we have. So we know quite well how much, let's say, the different profiles, RTOs, industry, NGOs, and this kind of partners can claim, even depending on their country. So we have databases for Germany, for Spain, for Italy, for France, for Norway. So if something deviates already in the proposal preparation phase, what we ask the partner is to double check these numbers, or eventually we may even want to not include the partner if we consider that such expense is not duly justified and threatens or has the potential to downscore the evaluation. This is our approach.
Okay, thanks very much. That's I could maybe just add again that we have cases where indeed we cut the personnel costs as a result of checking them against the dashboard data, but here really experts have very clear briefing to not penalize the project in terms of score. So I think I can really reassure people that this is not per se a risk in getting funded. But of course, it's a very good practice to be checking up front and to make sure that all your costs are reasonable and well justified. That's very obvious. Maybe we can go to the next question.
Yes. So does addition of new subcontracting still need an amendment? Well, yes, I would say yes, because there are new or additional activities that will be subcontracted. So this implies indeed an amendment.
Yeah, I mentioned before, it's the same as for actual cost grants. A subcontract needs to be basically, you need to still say and have in the grant agreement and report who does what. And this can include coverage of tasks by subcontractors. You can include the subcontractors in your proposal. They get evaluated. They become part of the grant agreement. Later on, this list of subcontractors can be changed. You can remove one, you can add a new one, and this can work either by way of an amendment or by reporting a new subcontractor as part of your technical report. Both are totally valid methods of adding a subcontractor, but yes, you are not allowed, let's say, to hide a subcontractor. You cannot use a subcontractor silently. Certainly in the event that you will be reviewed and you have to show who did what, this would lead to a problem, because then we would find that you have used an unauthorized subcontract, which would then certainly lead to a consequence. So like in any other grant, you need to be clear who did what, and that includes the subcontractors, amendments, or the technical reports are vehicles to change your subcontractors in the course of the project if needed. Same as in other projects. Let's maybe go to the next question. Andreia?
Yeah. Are these rules applicable to both Pillar 2 projects and EIC Accelerator projects, or are there significant differences? Overall, the same rules applies to both Pillar 2 projects and the EIC Accelerator. There are some differences between these projects. For example, one of them is the pre-financing. The EIC Accelerator projects have more pre-financings as opposed to the Pillar 2 projects that typically have only one pre-financing. But other than that, I would say that the rules are the same for both.
No, I think I would like to stress that the lump sum rules that we are talking about here are exactly the same. They're in fact even not only the same between Pillar 2 and Pillar 1, where the EIC, Pillar 3, where the EIC is located, but they are the same for the whole of Horizon Europe, and they're even the same for all EU funding programs. So lump sums are defined, the possibility of using lump sums is defined in the financial regulation of the EU budget, and it is applied and is used in many EU programs, not only in the Research and Innovation Framework Program. And so these rules that we're mentioning here are generally applicable across the board to all lump sum grants in all programs. Well, there are different flavors I mentioned in the beginning, but that doesn't mean that the basic rules and even the corporate lump sum model grant agreement, so the model grant agreement that we use in Horizon Europe for lump sums, is the same model grant agreement that is used in other programs. So yes, the rules are the same, and the difference that Andreia just mentioned, that is not really lump sum specific. The fact that EIC Accelerator projects receive 2 pre-financings or Can they even?
Yes.
Yeah. So they have more than the standard is to have one pre-financing at the beginning, and accelerator projects have a second pre-financing later in the project. But that was also the case when they were still using actual cost, and is not really related to the fact that they have now switched to lump sums. Okay, next question. Yeah, I think we've answered this, but let's maybe answer it again, Andreia.
Yes, so just to quickly answer, do I need an amendment to transfer my lump sum budget from one work package to another? So first of all, you can implement your project as you see fit. So you can spend the budget as you see fit, as long as you implement the project as described in the grant agreement. So you don't necessarily need an amendment for that. But if you want to formalize the changes to the lump sum budget in the grant agreement, so in the Annex 2 of the grant agreement, you need to do an amendment. So that would be the short answer.
Yes, absolutely. So I think here maybe the simple answer is yes. If you really formally want to transfer it and you want to see this change in your grant agreement, this is possible. And then, yes, you need an amendment for it. As for any change, whatever is a change in the grant agreement can only be done by way of an amendment. It doesn't matter whether this affects the technical description, your work plan, the partners that are in the grant agreement, or indeed the lump sum breakdown, the financial Annex 2. Any change in any part of the grant agreement we have, of course, needs an amendment. But we mentioned that in lump sum funding, many such changes are also possible as long as you implement the project as agreed without formally requiring this amendment. But that's an aside. If you want to have it in the grant agreement, absolutely, it's possible. And yes, you need an amendment. Next question.
Okay, I can take this one. Exactly where in project proposal we can explain person months if there are more than amount on dashboard? Should it be elaborate somewhere in part B? So I would say the best place to explain and justify your personal cost or your cost generally is the any comments tab of the Excel detailed budget table. So this doesn't have any limit, word limit, so you can really put all the justification that you want inside the detailed budget table. And of course, if you also feel the need to elaborate something in part B, so in the narrative part of the proposal template, you can also include something there. But I would say that the Any Comments tab is the best place to include these justifications for the cost.
I would like to add that when it comes to part B, where you explain where you describe your work plan, well, one of the main reasons why you would be above the dashboard value is because you in your project part use a lot of, or maybe exclusively, senior staff. Now, typically what you have and what is most normal is that you have a mix. There is junior staff, there's maybe established staff, and there's senior staff in a project. And that gives, in that mix, it's maybe less, would be more unusual that you're really way above this dashboard value. But since the dashboard value is an average for the grants that we see, it is not surprising that if you, let's say, only look at the cost for senior staff in isolation, that this is indeed per month higher. So if you would use only senior staff, that would be an explanation why your cost is higher. But then, of course, your proposal should be very clear and should also in part B clarify why you would need only senior staff and nobody else. Why this project is carried out exclusively or dominantly by senior staff. And if that is, if you have a very good explanation for that, that would be one case where it would be absolutely acceptable that you have costs, that your average costs then turn out to be higher than this 80%. That is probably the case in most countries and most situations. A senior professor in a university will likely have a higher cost than what you see in this one. What is the maximum shown in the dashboard? if you then add some PhD students and some postdocs, then the average would probably go down below, but the professor, him or herself alone, would probably above. But your proposal should then clarify, why are you, let's say, only working with professors and with nobody else? That is not obvious, and that should definitely then be clear from your description. Not sure if Carlos would like to come in on that one.
I wanted to comment on this one, Ulrich and Andreia. I think you have done a good presentation, a good overview about the person month issue here. I am not sure how many participants we have today, but I am quite sure that many of them, perhaps they don't have even seen the Excel for the lump sum preparation. Just letting you know, guys, that this Excel is quite robust, is quite good when it comes down to the details, because besides having each one of the work packages independently when it comes to direct personnel costs, subcontracting, and so on, you have, here I can see, 5 categories for the person month rate. We have the seniors, we have the juniors, we have technical, administrative, and others. So within these 5 categories, my experience with all these projects is that most of the partners should be able to allocate their resources there. We don't have much resources beyond these 5 categories. So you can allocate the number of person months that you need of each one of the given profiles to a given work package. It's quite obvious, or should be a relatively obvious practice, not to include a lot of person months for senior profiles, let's say, necessarily in the coordination and management. If we are dealing with research ourselves, we put the senior researchers in the technical layer of the work package. That is not necessarily the work package 1, coordination and management. There, we may want to go to profiles that operate under a lower person month rate. Here, mostly administrative or eventually technical personnel to track the implementation. This secures that the resources connected to the let's say, the highest skilled personnel, the researchers, are allocated to the technical parts of the project, so that we skip or we avoid having a let's say, a too large budget associated to the implementation. And this lump sum structure, this Excel that the European Commission has prepared, allow us to track quite a lot in detail who is doing what in all the work packages of the project. So if you have these different person month rates for the different profiles, and I'm sure most of you will have it, please use them in the lump sum, because then the overall the shape of the proposal and the credibility is much better. As Ulrich said, perhaps you don't need senior researchers for absolutely all the activities throughout the project. And also it's quite advisable, we can say, that in European projects, we try to include junior personnel so that we can raise the competence of the future workforce of Europe. And of course, these profiles operate at a much lower person month rate. That's it from my side.
Thanks Carlos, for complimenting. Yeah. Thanks very much. So let's go. We are now already at 12 o'clock, I see. So in principle, our time is over. I think we should then maybe even cut here, because the question on how to set up the personnel costs and the person months, and I think Carlos' comment on the budget table, that was quite useful. If you are applying to a lump sum project for the first time, indeed, this step, one could really say the lump sum budget table, this is what makes the lump sum process different from an actual cost grant. Otherwise, your proposal is the same. This table is the one document that is different, and I stress again that the information that is collected in this document is information that you would need in any case to build your budget for any project, because it goes without saying that in all projects the budget cannot just fall out of thin air. It has still to be based on detailed budget planning, and our rules are very clear about that. The Commission could even ask you to provide those details on a case-by-case basis, even if they are not part of the proposal. So you must indeed always have this information, and in lump sum grants you put this in the Excel file. Now, we've heard before there is sort of to an extent, this lump sum file can be very useful for planning. I think we heard something like that from Carlos. It can really help you get an overview, financially speaking, and also in organization and in execution of the project. On the other hand, we acknowledge there is this extra step that you have to do, and you have to familiarize yourself with it. So thank you very much for the input from Carlos. Again, I point to the video that we have on preparing on the lump sum budget table. We have 3 videos. One is to get you started, the introduction, the general ideas of lump sum. And then there is also one, I think, on setting up this budget table, and one on the evaluation.
Yes, how to evaluate a detailed budget table, and also how to use the personnel cost dashboard.
Yeah, and one specifically on the dashboard. So this little series of 3 videos, I repeat again, if you are new to lump sums, I think it's worth spending those maybe 10 minutes. They are short videos to get a good overview and get started. With that, I'd like to thank again Andreia, Carlos, your colleagues, and our audience for being with us today. Have a very nice day. We are here to help you. Please also make use of the Research Inquiry Service if needed to ask your questions. Thanks very much. Have a nice day. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks
Have
a
a
lot
nice
for
day.
having us.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.